comes into that, the fire of the sun, that primal energy, right? And the universe laughs and gives me stuff that feeds into that theme, always, always. So one of the things that hit my news feed this week was an article that was first published in Popular Mechanics that tells about a middle school student in Canada who won all kinds of science fair awards for managing to create a working model of a scientific invention that first showed up over 2,000 years ago, but has never necessarily been successfully created, and that is, it's called a death ray, okay? Also called a heat ray, but that's not nearly so sexy to a 12-year-old working on a science project, okay? First invented by Archimedes, who's a Greek that lived 2,000 years ago. And the idea is you focus the sun's light in with mirrors to focus on a point that heats so dramatically that it sets fire to that point of focus. Now, scholars disagree on whether that was ever actually successfully done in Archimedes' lifetime. Excuse me. There is a myth or fact that in the siege of Syracuse back in 213 BC, Archimedes helped the Greek soldiers polish their shields to a mirror finish and array them appropriately to point out at the Roman ships in their harbor and set fire to them. Again, nobody knows for sure whether that's fact or myth. But this 13-year-old set up mirrors, used as a light source. He used a heat lamp, focused that energy on a piece of cardboard, and set fire to the cardboard. All right, success. He also discovered that the more mirrors he put in his array, the more energy got focused into that spot. Hotter, faster fire. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up at all, the reason the universe landed it in my lap on my news feed, is because what I want to talk about this week is focus and fire. Imagine that. Here we are. And talking about focus, I've got this great quote from Rick Warren in The Purpose-Driven Life. And he tells us, the power of focusing can be seen in light. Diffused light has little power or impact, but you can concentrate its energy by focusing it. With a magnifying glass, the rays of the sun can be focused to set grass or paper on fire. When light is focused even more as a laser beam, it can cut through steel. There is nothing quite as potent as a focused life, one lived on purpose. And that's what we're talking about today. And what we're focusing is that inner fire. That fire of knowing something so strongly that you just have to express it into the world. And I bet every one of you has had at least a moment, if not a larger span of time, where something was so important to you that you lit up with it, that you fired up with it, that you needed to express it as who you were. And, okay, if you haven't had that experience, I bet you've had the yearning for an experience like that. And that yearning itself has energy, right? I want you to key into what that felt like right now. What it felt like to light up. Because that's what we're after. That's where we'd like to spend more of our time, wouldn't we? That could make life juicy. What if we were that enthusiastic, that excited about who we were and what we were bringing to the table and what we wanted to show ourselves as in the world? What would that feel like? Now, Reverend Dr. Sunshine Michelle Coleman, who put together this month's material for Holy Boldness, great title, I assume it's hers. Oh boy. When she talks about being fired up, here's some of what she has to say. Holy boldness is the fire in your soul that propels you to action. It ignites the flame within, keeps it stoked, and confirms that anything is possible in God. Holy boldness is the fire in the belly that is the necessary conviction for effective prayer. And what she's talking about there, that fire that's the necessary part of prayer. Well, Ernest Holmes, founder of this teaching, author of The Science of Mind, talked about that when he was teaching people how to use prayer, what we call spiritual mind treatment, which is a very specific form of affirmative prayer. And Ernest was very clear that all the flowery words in the world and all the intellectual knowing in the world didn't have the impact that what he called the fire of treatment was going to give to the process. That fire that lights it up and makes us know it is so inside us on a much deeper, fuller level than just thinking about it way up here. Now, two ways that feeling shows up for me when I'm praying, when I am doing spiritual mind treatments. First way, which I think is most of what Ernest was talking about, that's the excitement and enthusiasm, tongue-tied this morning. The excitement and enthusiasm for that thing that I'm treating for. That feeling or thing or event or physical healing that I am using my prayer to create and call up into manifestation. I get fired up with that idea. Another way that fire shows up for me is a similar rush of excitement and enthusiasm in what we label our first two steps of treatment, which is just recognizing God is all there is, therefore that's my life right here, right now. And when I connect with that, when I use my words in prayer to remind myself of that truth, when I start feeling that truth, it lights me up. I can feel it, and it feels good. And I would call that the fire of treatment. Now, Ernest didn't necessarily identify it as that, because this is gospel according to Lin. I think he didn't as much because he was living from that space all of the time, just as I sure wish I was. Yes, he taught us that truth, but he paid less attention to it in his prayer work because he was already there. We have this 5-step model of how we get ourselves there. But when you read the treatments that Ernest spoke or wrote in all the many, many, many books he's written, often there aren't 5 steps. Because he didn't need to remind himself of that truth. He just was there. Wouldn't that be cool? To live in that space, lit up, fired up, on purpose, knowing the truth of who we are. Okay, most of us need more attention to a process to get us to feeling that, knowing that. Reverend Sunshine talks about the process of discovering it and tuning into it and learning to trust it and learning to tap into it so that it can light us up like that. And the name she gives that thing that we're tuning into, she calls it the knower within. Now, we don't have to call it God. We don't have to call it Spirit. We can find a word that works for us. But that space inside us that knows itself, that's what I'm talking about here. And yeah, other names for that are Spirit, God, Source, whatever word works for you. I love the idea of the knower within. And she points out that that's like having the fire of God within us, to find that and key into it and live from there, live from that fire, be fired up. Reverend Sunshine says, this divine knowingness brings us conviction that allows us to walk boldly and confidently in a sacred manner. Because we know the secret of all things, our divine source, and our abundant supply. This knowingness is a reassuring comfort that provides the compass of direction, the light within the darkness, and the reassurance that everything is going to be all right regardless of appearances. The knower knows that. The knower knows that, and I'm here to tell you that it knows that, whether we're knowing it in the moment or not. Yeah, we spend a lot of time in confusion, in distress, in wondering how the heck is this ever going to work out. We can feel disconnected. We can feel alone. Well, you know what? We get to forgive ourselves for those moments. We get to be kind to ourselves for those moments. And we get to remember that even in those moments, there is something within us that has not lost it, that lives it, that's alive and well at the heart of who we are, and that has not been wounded or damaged or separated in any way. The knower that knows, it's in there. It's always accessible, it's always available, it's always ready for us to remember it and turn toward it and sink into it and feel it and use it. And we got to choose to do that. We've got to choose to turn toward it. We've got to surrender into it and say, look it, I'm telling myself all these stories, can you help me out here? And it will say yes, because that's what it does. And it's there, and it's true, and it's always been true. I had one practitioner client years ago that in her own treatment work would say, the truth that has always been true. Well, yeah, there it is. And it's inside us all the time. Inside us and all around us, and available and accessible and ready for us to say yes to it and live from that truth. And you know, for me, sometimes, even in confusion, even in distress, sometimes I can get there pretty much right away. I can just remember, and it's there. One of the tools I use is a mantra affirmation. You've probably heard me use it before. It's one of my go-tos, and that's simply saying, I don't know how, but Spirit does. It's admitting, okay, my intellect cannot unpack this right now. My ego is trying to push and pull it, and it's not working. I don't know how, but Spirit does. Again, if the word Spirit doesn't work for you, find the word that works for you. What name for that in your no word works for you? How are you going to tune into it? How are you going to let it fire you up? And then sometimes all the mantra reciting, all the affirmations, all the trying to remember, sometimes I've dug myself a deeper hole than that. Frog in my throat today, excuse me. Sometimes I need more help than that. And that's when a prayer partner, a practitioner, a minister, a prayer circle, somebody else to come into my need in the moment and say, you're okay, let's do this work together. Let's get there. And that's why we belong to a center like this. That's why we find a community like this of folks that are on similar paths, so that they can be there for us when we need that outside voice to say, hey, I support you in this moment. How can I help? How can we find that inner truth together? Highly recommend it. Highly recommend it. I've got prayer partners and mentors and buddies all over the place that I can call on. And then sometimes I even need a reminder there. The mentor that I check in with once a month, as I'm telling her what the month has been, she almost always says, you know, Lynn, you could have picked up the phone. Yeah, do that. Do that. Light the fire however you can. Remember, it's there. Allow it to fire you up. You can also attest, any prayer I do for somebody else when they ask me for it has shown up because it's something I need to hear about me. Funny how that happens. Because that, again, that knower within is also the knower without. allness, it's the oneness. So it's way bigger than me. Way bigger than my little experience. And it's all waiting for us to recognize and realize and remember that we're connected to it. We're made of it. It's all loving and living itself in and through and for and as us. All the loving intelligence that we need, all the information we need, all the tools we need are given us when we say yes to remembering who we really are. So this week we're being invited to take that knowing and use it to be a bigger version of ourselves out in the world, to better be who we are. There's a challenge. Sounds like a daunting one, but it's not about us in the little ego sense. It's about this power, this fire that wants to move through us. And it's going to show up differently for every individual and the way they choose to play it in the world. Because that's the other part of this beautiful paradox, is we're all doing it our own unique ways. So what's your fire? And how's it lighting you up? Reverend Sunshine quotes a campaign slogan from Barack Obama. He first heard it from Edith Childs, who was a politician in South Carolina. And it's fired up, ready to go. Notice there's two pieces to that. One's the fire, and the other is, all right, where am I using it? What am I pointing it at? What am I focusing on? Where am I pointing this infinite enthusiasm that wants to use me in the world? And to use it in a spirit-informed, spirit-led, spirit-driven direction. Spirit's energy, not ego energy, not shoulda, woulda, coulda, or victim, or if only they'd straighten out. What does spirit want to express through us? To let our light up the world, to be ready, willing, and able to do what needs to be done. How can we open ourselves to get that direction, to get that purpose, to get that focus? One thing, there's another paradox. I said a moment ago, it's not about ego energy. Well, most of our cultural models say that power is about ego and about force and about muscling it. What if to really use that inner fire, that true fire, that truth that's always been true, what if it requires vulnerability and humility? Now, those words don't usually end up in the conversation when you're talking about power, right? That's the paradox. Humility opens us up to something way bigger than ego, push, force. So much bigger. So much lighter. So much clearer. So much purer than all the stories we've told ourselves about what's going on. Humility, vulnerability. Wow. Okay. And I find it interesting that most of our cultural models would say, what? Jesus knew this one. He was tapped into it in a way that most of the folks around him didn't understand. When they asked him about, okay, what authority are you using when you speak these words and when you do these things? He said, it's not my authority. Quote from John 14:10. The Father that dwelleth in me, he doeth the works. Now, we have evolved a little bit from the word Father and the word he. I want to point out that Jesus had evolved a whole lot to use Father and he, because he was from a culture where God wasn't even a name you said out loud. Jesus brought him in and made him a loving father. Him, all right, 2,000 years ago, him. Again, how do we want to evolve those words and keep that message, that life, that light, that fire within me is what's doing the work? What if? What if we found that? What if we lived that? What if we let it light us up? What if we learn to live from the truth of the knower within? What if we learn to truly live our power from that amazing power place that's within each one of us when we choose to allow it to be the truth of who we are? Well, no, it's always the truth of who we are. When we choose to remember, it's the truth of who we are. Isn't living from that kind of power place, that kind of light and warmth and excitement and enthusiasm, isn't that how you might want to live? Sounds pretty sweet to me. And let's take that into prayer. One life. I know there's only one life, one infinite life, one living power, one living, loving intelligence, one pure energy. And it's all that is. And that means my life is inside it. Every life is inside it, made of it, using it, living it, expressing and experiencing it in our own amazing, individuated ways. When I really know that, when I dive into that and feel that truth, then when I speak my word from that truth, it is the infinite speaking its truth through me. And of course it's saying yes, because it's saying yes to itself. It's saying yes to the infinite possibility, the infinite good that is God, Spirit, Source, whatever name. Oh. So, standing in this, I speak my word for remembering that fire is burning. Remembering that fire is the truth of who I am. Remembering that fire can express into the world in amazing ways. And so I just speak a word of setting aside everything that might get in its way. Letting that fire light me up. Living all fired up and ready to go. And I'm grateful for how good it feels in this moment to feel it. I'm grateful for how it shows up in my experience in the next moment and the next day and this next year. I am grateful for how good it manifests in the world because of me. And in that gratitude, I let it go. Just let it go. And let it be. And together we say, and so
it is.